مساء الخير جميعا، وشكرا جزيلا على حضوركم اليوم لهذه الندوة في هذه الظروف الجوية الغير المواتية. فسعدنا جدا أنه وجودكم هنا وحضوركم، وأيضا نشكر الدكتور حارث أكرم الاختصاص في جراحة الجملة العصبية لحضورنا لهذه الندوة وإعطائنا وإغناء معلوماتنا عن خبرته في هذا المجال. وخلال هذه الندوة راح يصير عندنا مداخلة أيضا من الدكتور هادي الخليلي، الجراح الأعصاب المشهور العراقي، والذي سيعقب على ندوة الدكتور حارث، وأيضا على مجال جراحة الأمراض العصبية في العراق وسيرته خلال 60 سنة الماضية. وبعد ذلك راح تكون فترة قصيرة جدا لتناول المرطبات والى اخره، وبعدها راح يجري تكريم للاستاذ الدكتور صباح جاسم، وفي نهاية الندوة راح ننتهي وجميعا نودعكم بخير. فبس مقدمة أحب أن أشرح على الندوة اللي راح يقدمها الدكتور حارث أكرم مشكورا. هي في الآونة الأخيرة الحقيقة شهدت واجهات الدماغ الحاسوب تحولا من تقنيات عصبية تجريبية إلى أنظمة سريرية عملية تعيد القدرة على التواصل والاستقلالية والتحكم بالبيئة المحيطة للأشخاص الذين يعيشون في حالة الشلل الشديد. وتمثل دراسة برايم جي بي التابعة لشركة نيورالينك أول تقييم سريري لواجهة الدماغ الحاسوب القابلة للزرع بالكامل في المملكة المتحدة، كما تعد أول تجربة من نوعها تجرى ضمن خدمات هيئة الصحة الوطنية البريطانية NHS. وقد نجح برنامج كوين سكوير، مستشفيات كوين سكوير تابعة ل UCLH مستشفيات جامعة كوليدج لندن حتى الآن في زراعة الجهاز ل7 مرضى، مما يجعله أكبر مركز تجارب نيورالينك خارج أمريكا الشمالية. وهذه التجارب كلها تجري ضمن بيئة أكاديمية صحية تخضع لضوابط تنظيمية صارمة ضمن برنامج يشمل الجوانب الأكاديمية والتنظيمية والإخلاقية والتنسيق بين مختلف الاختصاصات والتعاون بين الفرق السريرية والهندسية والصناعية. وسيقدم الدكتور حارث أكرم في محاضرته الأسس العلمية التي تقوم على التسجيل العصبي داخل قشرة الدماغ كمنصة لفك رموز الحركة المقصودة وتمكين التحكم بالأجهزة الرقمية وتدريب المرضى على استخدام الجهاز والمتابعة طويلة الأمد وتقييم النتائج التي تركز على جودة حياة المرضى واحتياجاتهم. والآن أنتقل إلى السيرة الذاتية للدكتور حارث أكرم، فهو استشاري جراحة الأعصاب الوظيفية في المستشفى الوطني لطب وجراحة الأعصاب في كوين سكوير اللي ذكرتها سابقا، والتابع لمستشفيات UCLH في لندن. وهو أيضا يشغل منصب أستاذ مشارك سريري فخري في معهد كوين سكوير لعلوم الأعصاب بجامعة UCL، وله خبرة خاصة في تقنيات التعديل العصبي المتقدمة وواجهات في التحفيز العميق للدماغ، يعني Deep Brain Stimulation، وجراحات الأعصاب الاستئصالية والموجات فوق الصوتية المركزة الموجهة بالرنين المغناطيسي، يعني MRI Directed. ويرتكز عمله على التكامل بين جراحة الأعصاب الدقيقة وعلوم الأعصاب الحاسوبية بصورة آمنة وقابلة للتوسع وضمن الضوابط الأخلاقية. إضافة إلى كل هذا وأخيرا وليس آخرا، الدكتور حارث هو يشغل عضوية لجان دولية ضمن الجمعية العالمية للجراحة التجسيمية وجراحة الأعصاب الوظيفية، يعني World Society for Stereotactic and Functional Neurosurgery، ويسهم في الجهود العالمية الرامية إلى تعزيز الاستخدام الأخلاقي والقائم على الأدلة للتقنيات العصبية. فبعد كل هذا التقديم البسيط احنا نتشرف بالدكتور حارث أكرم، والساحة لك أيها العزيز.
على الدعوة الحلوة وعلى التقديم.
عفوا اقاطعك دكتور حارث، انا نسيت اقول رجاء التليفونات كلها خلوها على الموبايل او سايلنت، واثناء المحاضره رجاء يتم سكوت تام بالقاعه، مع الشكر الجزيل.
شكرا اشكرك وشكرا لكم، يعني جايين في هاليوم الحار، يوم عراقي. انا المحاضره مالتي بالانجليزي، فاذا اكو اي شيء بعدين تسالون بالعربي مو مشكله، بس اذا سوي بالعربي ما نخلص اليوم. نبدا بالانجليزي. Okay, so this is a culture of neurons, and the neuron is that's a single unit that basically.
الصوت عزيزي.
الصوت. Okay. Okay. Is this better?
Yes.
Good. So this is basically a time lapse of a bunch of neurons that are trying to make connections with other neurons, and that's how basically our brains work. And we didn't know about this in the past. So this is actually, a relatively new discovery. I said it, and I'll show you how we got to find out how these neurons connect to each other and how they operate. On the right, this is a sketch by Kahal, who discovered neurons. He saw them under the microscope, and then did those amazing sketches. And the reason why we didn't know about those neurons is we didn't actually have a way of staining those neurons. So the stain that, if you take a sample from tissue, to be able to see it under the microscope, you need to apply something called a stain, because that will show you the cell body and it will show you all the structures around the cell body. And the stain that was used commonly to stain the brain was called the carmine stain, which is basically the same stain that is still used or was used in lipsticks. It gives you kind of red, kind of intense red, so crimson in English. It actually comes from an Arabic word. And this stain comes from the crushed female cochineals, which is a form of beetle that kind of gives that stain, which is also, that means it's not vegan, it's not kosher, and used to be in Campari, but they had to change the recipe in 1995 to make it kosher, so that people who have kosher food can drink it. So that's the problem. We couldn't see, using that stain, we couldn't see nerve cells. We couldn't see those neurons. All we could see are those very big nuclei, so very big cell bodies. And because of that, scientists thought that the brain works as one big structure, one big organ. And that was called the reticular theory of brain function. So it wasn't really until those two very, very important scientists, an Italian scientist called Golgi, and again, Ramon Cajal, a Spanish scientist that mentioned earlier. Golgi invented a new way of staining brain tissue. It's called silver staining, or the Golgi method. And what's really impressive about that way of staining brain tissue is that it stains selectively some nerve cells. So it can go into the tissue, and it will just stain a few of those nerve cells. So now when you get a sample, and you look at it under the microscope, you can see it. And then Cajal did those really amazing drawings, and he came up with the neuron theory. And he basically thought that the brain doesn't work as one big organ, but you have those neurons that are connected to each other, and they form networks, and that's how the brain works. And because of that, both of them received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1906. And that's really when the field of neuroscience as we know it was born. So, up until then, we didn't really know how many neurons we have. There was, people speculated, and we thought that, well, we have about 100 billion neurons. And it wasn't until actually quite recent. So 2005, this Brazilian scientist did a very simple experiment. She developed a technique that's called the isotropic fractionation technique. Now that sounds very fancy, but actually what she did was she got 3 brains and she made brain soup. So she put the brains in a blender, and then she just had the soup, which she then took a small sample from, and she looked at it under the microscope. She counted the number of neurons, and then she extrapolated how many neurons we have. And that's how we know. We have 86 billion neurons as human beings. Now, that taught us quite a lot, because if we do the same experiment to other, scientists were baffled. Why, for example, why do animals like elephants, African elephants, have huge brains, but they don't have the same intelligence that we have? And that's because the human brain is packed very, very well with neurons. So it's very dense, but most of those neurons are in the cortex. So in the surface of the brain, where we have what we call higher cognitive functions. So memory, thinking, higher behavior, all of those functions are packed in the surface. And humans have 16.3 billion neurons on the surface of the brain. Whereas if you go to the African elephant, see that the total number of neurons much higher, 57 billion, but only 5.6 billion are in the cortex. And then when you go down to animals, and also the efficiency, so those neurons are packed, really densely packed in humans. If you wanted to get the same number of neurons in a rodent, in a rat, then the head will be, very, very big to pack all the number of neurons. And this is my golden retriever. He has 627 million cortical neurons, and they're some of the most intelligent dogs. And I know that all of those neurons will be firing when we have chicken in the house. So, but that's the comparison. So we stay with the dogs. Now we know that we have those neurons in the cortex, but how does function sit in each? Are there different areas in the brain that control different things? So we didn't know until a couple of German scientists started doing experiments, and this is after the invention of electricity, because electricity was a very exciting thing, and scientists started to use electricity to try to do all sorts of stuff, including passing electricity in the brain. And they started experimenting on dogs. This is their paper in 1870, where they could map out to the area in the brain that controls motor function. So that moves the arms and the legs. They can map out specific areas. So now we know that those neurons are organized in the cortex to work out different areas. Now the next step was to do these animals in non-human primates. This was done by David Ferrier. So he was a scientist and a neurologist in Queen Square, where I work. And he could map out the motor area of the monkey. And then comes this brilliant Victorian neurosurgeon. This is a colorized photograph taken in Queen Square in 1906. So this is where I work now. It's where the first ever brain surgeon was appointed as a brain surgeon. Before that, surgeons used to do everything and sometimes operate on the brain. But he was specifically appointed as a brain surgeon, and he was a scientist. So this is Sir Victor Horsey. He invented something called the stereotactic technique. So he invented a frame which we can use to get to areas in the brain with precision, which is actually what I do now with my work, and I'm going to show you later. This is the hospital. It still looks the same if you come and visit. I mean, there's a lot attached to it, but that's still the hospital where I work. And Sir Victor was a real gentleman. He was for a campaigner for socialism, for equality, for women suffragette, and he was a teetotaler. And this is his grave. That's in Amara. So he died in Iraq in 1916 of a heat stroke. So he was with the British Army and he died in Iraq. He was very young, 49. And then we just forward a little bit. This is 1912. Hans Berger, psychiatrist. Thank you. Psychiatrist in Germany. Now we know that the brain responds to electricity, but does the brain generate electricity? Well, Hans Berger showed that if we put electrodes on the scalp and we can measure this very, very small electric current, it's now called EEG, and he at the time called it psychic energy. But this is now, we know this is an EEG montage, put electrodes on the scalp, and you can listen to different areas in the brain and the surface of the brain firing. This is just to simulate waking up, and that's how we now can measure, we get this signal out of the brain. So what can we do with this? Next experiment was in the 60s, this is 1969, where a scientist implanted an electrode in a monkey, and on the screen showed the monkey that, if the monkey activates that electrode by trying to move the hand, then you get a reward. And then the monkey was using the brain basically thinking to move a cursor on the screen. And that's considered the first ever brain-computer interface. So it actually goes quite way back, 1969. It's not a very new thing. And it was very basic, and you can see that you need to have a wire that connects the electrode into the computer. But this is how we now can read this information that's coming out of the brain and use it to do something. Right. So now we've come to the present time. So we know that there is neuronal firing in the brain. We know that these neurons are firing, and we know that they're specific in the hand area, for example. And what we need to do is get that signal out of the brain and then get it into a form of decoder. So this is now an AI decoder, which will read all of these waves that you saw, but actually turn it into something meaningful, which is, let's say, moving a cursor on the screen or controlling a robotic arm. And then that will feed back into the decoder so that you can recalibrate, and then you make that signal more and more decipherable. And this is the way that this works, is that we're now not trying to modulate networks in the brain. We're using this to bypass areas of the brain that are damaged. So if you have that signal, you're trying to get up and walk, and you have a signal that's coming from the motor cortex. It goes down the spinal cord, but you have a spinal cord injury, so you can't get up. You know, you're paraplegic. If we get that signal out and then pass it through a decoder, pass it through a computer, and then back into the muscles, then we can use it as an implantable neuroprosthesis. That's the general principle. And you can use that signal to operate a robotic arm, operate an exoskeleton, or use a computer. This is a patient who's quadriplegic, who's using a robotic arm to feed himself. So this is a patient with a Neuralink implant.
Turn the volume.
Oh, no, it's the TV.
I'll be able to talk with my hands again.
So he's gesticulating.
We're all here tonight.
He's using his hand to talk, the robotic arm. So he's finding it funny.
Yeah, the arm gesticulating. I see.
Okay. This is a bit sciencey, so very quickly, what this means is that there are some neurons that encode directionality. So if let's say you're trying to move up, or move your wrist up, a neuron will fire. Try to move your wrist down, another neuron will fire. And same for all directions. So what we're trying to do is capture these neurons, and then we register them in the algorithm so that, you know, whenever you get signal from that neuron, you know that you're moving up, down, left, right. And this is something that was demonstrated in this really nice paper from the BrainGate trial from 2006, where they used microelectrode arrays like these. These are very small, that's 2 millimeter, and they pack 99 electrodes. They're quite rigid, so that goes in the brain, on the cortex of the brain. But the problem is it causes inflammation, it causes bleeding, and it stops working after a while. So it can work for a couple of years, 2-3 years, and then it stops working because of something called gliosis. So the brain doesn't like things being stuck in it. So it will start to cause scar tissue, and then that will cause scarring, so it stops working. There are different ways of getting the signal from the brain. We can put electrodes now through the veins. So you put it through the neck, and then it goes to the big vein at the top of the brain, and that gets signal from around the vein. You can put electrodes EEG, so just like what Hans Berger did. You put it under the skull, outside the coverings of the brain, they're called extradural. You can put it under the coverings of the brain, called subdural, or we can implant inside the brain. The trade-off is the more invasive we are, there's more risk, there's more complications, but we get better signal. So the analogy I like to use is, it's like you're going to listen to an orchestra, but if you want to get the best experience, you sit in front of the orchestra. If you're using an EEG cap, and you're listening to the music from the car park. So the closer you get to the brain, the better the signal, the more you can do with it. And these are lots of different electrodes that have been used for brain-computer interface. And just to show you, that's the microelectrode array that we have from the BrainGate trial. The signal, it gets out of the skull using a pedestal. There's actually a socket that's implanted in the skull, and then you put a cable in that takes all that signal out. See, this is a lab setting, this is a technician, and that's not really scalable. It's very interesting from a scientific point of view. It's very interesting to demonstrate that this works, but we're not going to treat patients with this. You can't really implant this in patients, send them home, and then they go and use it, because you need to be in a lab. You need to have a cable coming out of your head. This is the signal that we get. This is a montage from a Neuralink implant. Get about, let's see, 1,000 channels. So these are all, each one of those is a single neuron firing. That's when the patient wakes up. So it's a very dense data. Now, if we try to get all of that information out of the head, we need a cable. If we want to use Bluetooth, which is what we're using, then we need to do some processing inside. We need to do some filtering. This data will have a lot of noise every time we move, every time we blink. There's noise. We need to filter that out and then reduce the load on the Bluetooth transmitter. But also, the more we do this, the more heating we get. On your computer, if it's working hard, it will heat, which is fine, but you don't want heating on the brain. That's not great. So there is always this compromise. We need to do some filtering on the chip itself and then take out the signal, send it via Bluetooth. That uses battery as well. That's where the scalability comes in. This is just to show you whether recurrent neural network, this is a type of deep learning, artificial intelligence, sees. So it can filter out and you can reproduce that montage and then decipher it and use it in an effector. There are fully implantable systems available. So this is work from Utrecht, where they implanted deep brain simulation systems in patients, but connected them to electrocorticography, ECOG systems that sit on the surface of the brain. And this is, on the right, I'm going to play this video in a second. Very nice work from a group in Switzerland called Onward. And what they do is they have extradural grids. They take the signal, it goes to a decoder, and then it goes back into a spinal stimulator in patients with paraplegia and spinal cord injury.
Within 5 to 10 minutes, I could control my hips. The brain implant picked up what I was doing with my hips, so that was like the best outcome, I think, for everyone.
So you tell me when you're ready. So when everything is installed, the patient has first to learn how to work with his brain signal, and we also have to learn how to correlate this brain signal to the spinal cord stimulation. This is pretty short. In a few sessions, everything is linked and the patient starts training.
And what we observe along the duration of this training is a digital repair of the spinal cord. Not only he could leverage the digital bridge in order to control his paralyzed muscle, but also show a recovery of neurological function he had lost for many years.
Just an example, I'm training 10 years to stand up with a friend having a beer, and that's something I think people don't realize.
So the important thing about this is that the more the patient uses the implant, the better it gets. So it's using the brain just like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. The same with the spinal cord. The more stimulation the spinal cord gets, the better it gets at reacting to the stimulation. So it's not just a way of bypassing the disability, but it's a very good way to, for rehab as well. So this is a Neuralink implant, which differs from all of these implants in a way. It's about 25 millimeters in diameter, sits in the skull. The whole thing is internalized. There are no wires, and it has, so that's the size of the implant. It has, it carries about 1,000 electrodes, so we'll have 128 threads. Each one of those threads carries, I think someone is talking. So each one of those threads carries 8 electrodes, and the thread is 20 microns in diameter. So the human hair is 100 microns in diameter. This is how small this is, and it has a battery and a Bluetooth transmitter. Just to show you the size of these threads, so by comparison, so you can barely see them, which is why to implant these, and it has, so if you look closely, there's an eyelet at the tip, and you need a very big robot, an industrial sized robot, because that makes it very steady. That will identify, will see each one of those threads, and then a needle will come out of the robot. It will pick up each one of those threads, and then we'll stitch it in the brain. So just to show you the size of this robot, and you need to have at least one robot operator. Usually we get about 2 or 3 robot operators. What I do is I open up the skull, and then the robot will come in. It will register, and then gets get it starting. So that's what it looks like at the end. You have all of these threads that are implanted in the brain. I do the planning on the computer itself, so I go on the robot and I'll pick each one of those threads, and at the end, that's what it looks like. That's the hand area in the brain. I'm just going to take a step back and just explain what I do is slightly different to traditional neurosurgery. So in traditional neurosurgery, what we're trying to do is we're trying to fix broken anatomy. If you have a brain hemorrhage, or if you have an aneurysm, a tumor, then we go and try to fix that. And that is usually quite dangerous, which is why people are rightly so scared of neurosurgery. But it's usually we operate on patients to save their lives. So it's if you don't do anything, patients can die or become severely disabled. What I do in functional neurosurgery is different because patients are not dying most of the time. Patients have a disability because there is a problem with a neural network, and I operate on those dysfunctional brain networks. Most of my patients have Parkinson's disease. So, when you get to a level, when you get to advanced Parkinson's disease and you have something called motor fluctuations, when the medications are not working well, they come to me, put DBS electrodes in. I am on call today. And all patients with tremor, all patients with something called dystonia. I also operate on patients with severe mental disorders. So they have refractory mental disorders, Tourette syndrome. We've operated on 50 patients with Tourette's, patients with severe OCD, and patients with depression. And I operate on patients with pain. So conditions like migraine, cluster headache, trigeminal neuralgia. I'm very interested in cancer pain and refractory pain. And in my lab, so a big part of my research is to map out the agony network in the brain. And we've successfully mapped out what areas in the brain, what switches we need to turn off to get rid of agony, especially in patients with cancer pain. So that's something that is very close to my heart, really. What we do, we use ablation, so we use something called radiofrequency thermoablation. We use gamma knife. I have a high-intensity focused ultrasound. There's ultrasound machines that can make lesions in the brain, or deep brain stimulation. I do microvascular decompression and BCI. So the range of things that we do is very different to the rest of neurosurgery. I run a computational neuroimaging lab, and my PhD was in advanced MRI imaging. And first thing I did was I built this supercomputer in the office. It's still working. Honestly, it's amazing. This was in 2013, and I called it Gilgamesh. That's what we still use for surgery now. That maps out the networks in the brain that we can then go and operate on. So when we can map out these networks, we can see exactly what we want to hit. So this is a new type of imaging that I invented that shows us the areas in the brain that we can't see with normal MRI. And in this example, this is where we need to target for tremor control.
Yeah, and up again.
That's the patient with tremor. And what I'm doing is I'm implanting an electrode to make a small lesion to disconnect.
Okay, and bring it out again. Open and close.
And just like that, when you hit the right
Bring
spot,
it back under your chin.
you can get rid of the tremor. So that's what I do. That's actually what I do kind of on daily basis. Let's go back to the BCI work. So we've opened up as the lead site. It was meant to be a multi-center trial, with Queen Square as the lead site, and I'm the chief investigator. And I had 2 principal investigators in Queen Square and Newcastle. The aim was to recruit 7 patients. We ended up recruiting 7 patients in Queen Square within 2 months, which was very unexpected, but we worked very hard. But most of the patients had motor neuron disease or spinal cord injury. Just to give you just for a frame of reference, the other big center, which is the Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix, recruited 7 patients in 2 years. We did it in 8 weeks.
Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix, Arizona. 15 patients in 20 years. So we did very well. Once the patients are implanted, they switch on their laptop, their MacBook, and then the device gets calibrated. So this is what they see on their screen, and they try to move the cursor to these buttons, and then it will tell them to try right click, try left click, and what's happening is that this signal is coming out of the brain, and it goes into the decoder. The decoder then starts to learn what the signal means, because the patient, we know what the intention is, and then it keeps getting better and better. So I'm going to show you our first patient within 15 minutes of switching the device on, and he is moving that cursor on the screen to click these buttons, and that's just a close-up. So that's within 15 minutes, and this gets calibrated and it gets better and better.
In your life where
This is our second patient.
you suddenly no longer move any of your limbs, and this kind of technology kind of gives you a new piece of hope.
Though he's paralysed from the neck down, Sebastian Gomez Peña can now control his laptop and phone using just his mind.
You have this power of telepathy, effectively, and I'm just fascinated to find out how that feels.
Everyone in my position tries to move something in their body to see if there is any form of recovery. But now I think I'll move my hand to the right, to the left, think about clicking my fingers, and the technology just understands what I want to do, and it does it. Yeah.
You wouldn't even know the chip was there until it needs a daily charge.
There's a button there. If you click it, it should turn on the charger. If you hold it to my head right there, this means this is how we charge it.
So I'm charging the chip.
That is exactly what you do.
A keen rugby player and musician, Seb had just finished his first term at medical school when he made one ill-judged dive off a boat on holiday.
When I dived, I hit the floor and hit my head, and alongside breaking my neck, also broke my front 2 teeth. And yeah, that's how I started.
But it ended up with Seb enrolling in the first UK trial of the Neuralink device, a 5-hour operation performed largely by robot, which, through a hole in his skull, inserted threads 1/10 the thickness of a human hair, connecting 1,000 electrodes to the part of his brain that controls hand movements.
It makes the experience a lot better.
This is the first time his doctors have seen him since the device was switched on.
I can do this, move the mouse around, and that helps. That's a really good control. And that helps. This helps me practice to use it faster, and it also helps.
So he's become very good at chess. And by the way, those Neuralink patients play chess against each other. So we have the British team and the American teams. So what's next? I mean, it's very nice to be able to control the cursor. Can you imagine if you can't use a computer, you can't use your phone, it's incredibly disabling. But if you have no voice, then that's very isolating as well as disabling. And now that we can restore movement, the next step is to be able to restore voice. And there's very good work from San Francisco. There's something called the Bravo study. A friend of mine, Eddie Chang, has managed to get basically the signal from this motor speech area and use a very similar way to restore speech. And the way we do that is we get the intention to speak, that goes into a decoder, which then goes into a large language model like ChatGPT, which will predict what the next word is going to be. Okay, I'm going to play another video just to show you how that might work.
The device is an electrocorticography grid, which is attached to a pedestal, which is screwed onto the participant's skull. Anne is the very first person to have this combination.
On the screen, you'll see decoded text, speech, and avatar.
When Anne was 30 years old, she had a stroke, which led to locked-in syndrome.
Hey Anne, how's it going?
It is good to see you.
That's the first time we've ever had a conversation using this system.
If you are able to produce text, synthesize speech, and then also a personalized avatar, she believes that would really advance her ability to become a counselor and to work with people.
I thought it would be good for me.
How can we create technology that can help people really meaningfully contribute with all sorts of abilities?
Anything is possible.
There are issues with this technology. It's very scary, isn't it? For me, the biggest issue is device abandonment. So there are quite a few companies now developing these implants, and if you give someone their ability back, and then you go bust, and then the device stops working, then that's immoral. That's unethical, and I think we need to work to ensuring that someone is responsible for these patients. So I'm responsible, they're my patients, so I'm not going to do something that might jeopardize them in the future. So that's one big issue. Neuralink is very unlikely to go bust, but there are other companies that can do that. There are issues with neurosecurity. At the moment, the data that comes out, you saw that it looks like it's just neuronal firing, and it's not thinking. It's not reading your thinking. It's the intention to move, right? So it's not plugging into your memories or your thinking, but who knows what can happen in the future. If we try to encrypt this data, that will complicate the data transfer, it will cause latency, and that might actually make it not work as well as we want it to work. So there are conversations that we need to have and figure out how to make this safe as well as efficacious. There are issues with identity and agency. So you saw that patient was speaking. I mean, there was an agent that was interpreting and speaking for that patient. So who's actually who's making those words? It is that is an issue. And there's all the noise about this being augmentative enhancement, which I don't subscribe to. And there's a lot of hype in the media about this technology. So, what's next? We have different. We have newer companies that have. So I'm working with this company to develop graphene electrodes. This means they have very low impedance, and also they're MRI safe. We don't get artifact with graphene, and this is, I think, will be the next form of closed loop stimulation in deep brain stimulation. There's a company that's developed skull-based implants. It's called Motif, that delivers TMS, so transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's a very strong magnetic stimulation to treat mental disorders. So there's a trial in depression that's going to start soon, and I think that's very exciting too. I'm going to show you. This is again one of my patients who's worked with a third party to develop software to help him move his wheelchair. He's got motor neurone disease.
Hi, I'm Owen. Following a motor neurone disease diagnosis in June 2020, I gradually lost the ability to move and speak until I was fully paralysed. Recently, in December 2025, I received the Neuralink brain-computer interface implant in my brain, which enables me to control a computer with my thoughts. I use this to communicate with my family and friends, And now also thanks to the team at Homebrace, I can use it to drive my wheelchair just by using my thoughts. This has given me my independence back, is how my software looks on my computer screen. I can control the cursor with my brain-computer interface implant in my brain. I have a list of saved messages which I can quickly select to speak out loud. I can start driving by hovering the cursor over the ready and then the start button at the center of the screen. I then see an arrow which is telling the wheelchair which way to move. The lowest speed is useful for indoors or tight spaces, and the highest speed is useful for outdoors on wide open footpaths. I have precise control of the wheelchair with my thoughts, which enables me to drive through tight spaces and around obstacles. There is very little room to spare driving through this narrow gap, but I do it every day with ease. But what I most enjoy is being able to go for a walk with my wife and children again. This means I can go out and enjoy precious time with my loved ones and be actively involved in family adventures. I can be present and independent at the same time again. This technology has given me a new lease of life, and I am so grateful to the team at Homebrace for making it possible.
He'll be very happy when I tell him that I've shown this at the Irish Cultural Centre. So I'm sure he'll like that. So what's for us? I'm waiting for a bid, outcome from a bid that we submitted to ARIA. We're asking them for £10 million to fund this centre for research into brain-computer interface, and it's a huge collaboration with a lot of the UCL and London institutes, so watch this space. We really need, for this to work, it needs to be scalable, it needs to be reliable, and we need to have the ethical infrastructure. And I think the next decade needs closed-loop adaptive systems. They have to be fully implantable, and they need to work at home. They need to interface with devices at home. I've got 2 more videos to show you, and then this is a patient.
I am finally able to talk to you.
We're going to continue advancing the quality of the sensors, the number of the sensors. We want to build a system that goes directly from the brain to voice in real time. And Kenneth will have instantaneous feedback and control of this voice.
Everyone gets his own color.
Will be blue.
I am going to pay 3 to play Search for Life.
I will take 3.
You're gonna do that?
Yes, please. I'm done with my turn.
Purpose. We work together to make this thing better. Maybe I can't go endless, but I can participate in research and can give feedback. It will give us back a voice, and the voice is a very important thing to have. It would be a total waste of time. But didn't do all the good you possibly do. The more I turn out, go to be with the Lord. And that's the number one thing that I'm doing. Because I'm doing good for others, and that is the best thing of all.
You are the captain of your own ship. Make the most of what you're given in life.
Very impressive. So, last video I want to share with you, this is a patient I operated on Wednesday. So this is, this stuff is very high-level experimental, but I want to share with you what I do kind of, every week. I'm very lucky. I really love the job I do, and it still makes me very emotional. So this, thank you.
Well done.
So this
If
is
you can bring your hand up.
This is an 80-year-old
and bring it
with
towards your
essential
chin.
tremor.
I'll stop in a second then. Yeah, okay. And then just the cup. And go cheers. And okay, I think that's good. To tell us how you got to the hospital yesterday or the day before.
No, what I will tell you is what I've been looking forward to since I knew I was going to have this operation was meeting all the lovely staff who do such a great job. And my hero who's in my brain right at the moment. Okay.
She's got very tremulous voice as well. So her voice is severely affected.
And elbow out.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want to see the tremor, so don't worry.
Your target? Okay, good.
Sorry.
Yeah, that.
Open and close your hands. Okay. And just rest it for a second. And bring it up again. Open and close.
So that's just hitting the target. We haven't. The idea is to make a lesion, a permanent disconnection in this dysfunctional network in the brain. We just hit the target. Now see her voice.
Definitely better.
Improves as
Right.
well.
We do a lesion? Yeah? Okay, we're going to commit to this. Stop. And then let's go to... Okay, yeah. And then start. Okay, hand up in the air. Okay, open, close, open, close. Really hard, do it really fast. Yeah, play the piano. Yeah, that feels okay?
Yes.
Good, okay. And look at my finger. Good. Show me your teeth. Excellent. Say baby hippopotamus.
Baby hippopotamus.
Not bad, not bad. I think we're bang on target.
Yeah. Hand out
Okay.
again. And then bring it towards the chin. All the way to your chin.
I'm just sleeping. No movement. It's incredible. Wow.
Oh, that is rock solid already. Can we do a spiral again? Okay, so I give you the pen. Give you the pen. Yeah, and then try and do a spiral. Don't come.
Do it slowly,
So I'm checking that I'm getting rid of the tremor, but I'm not giving her ataxia, so loss of coordination. Because it's the same network, I need to disconnect enough to get rid of the abnormal oscillations in the brain.
Monday, Tuesday.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Right, and the R again, long. Right. There's still a hint, but a lot better.
Okay, so let's see. So do this slowly. And bring it slow and pretend that you're drinking.
ممكن. She starts laughing and crying at the same time.
To do this?
I'm guessing that's better, is it?
It's okay. It's okay.
Give him a book overview.
Trade advice. What's it?
Trust the trader.
Trust the trader.
So I'm going to give you a good review.
Oh.
Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور عارف. الانجازات هذه مذهله الحقيقه.
وفريدة من نوعها، وإحنا كلتنا فخر واعتزاز بدكتور شاب عراقي أنجز هذه المهمات العالمية مثل ما قلت الفريدة من نوعها. وفي محاضرته اللي ما ممكن ترجمتها للعربي مع الأسف هسه، ولكن هو أخذنا في جولة من بدايات جراحة الجملة العصبية والأجهزة والأدوات القديمة اللي كانت تستخدم، والطرق القديمة اللي كانت تستخدم، إلى الطرق الحديثة وباستعمال الحاسوب وتأثير الحاسوب والكمبيوتر والإلكترونيكس على مو فقط الحركة وإنما تفكير الإنسان من أجل أنه يحرك الذراعين أو القدمين أو حتى ينطق مثل ما شوفنا هسه في الفيديوهات الأخيرة هذه. فالكلمات عاجزة عن شكر الدكتور حارث. والحقيقة راح نأجل الأسئلة والأجوبة إلى بعد مداخلة الأستاذ الدكتور عبد الهادي الخليلي. فأنتقل إلى الأستاذ الدكتور عبد الهادي الخليلي اللي راح يشاركنا من على الزوم في التعقيب على محاضرة الدكتور حارث، وأيضا يشاركنا من على الزوم في خلال خبرته الواسعة في مجال جراحة الجملة العصبية في العراق. والأستاذ الدكتور عبد الهادي الخليلي هو قامة علمية طبية معروفة في العراق، في إنجلترا، وفي الولايات المتحدة. هو ولد في الكوفة وتخرج الأول على دفعته في الكلية الطبية جامعة بغداد في 1966، وتخصص في الجراحة العصبية في المملكة المتحدة، ونال زمالة كلية الجراحين الملكية البريطانية، وبعدها ماجستير فلسفة علوم من بريطانيا. عاد إلى العراق في سنة 1976 وعين في مستشفى الجملة العصبية وكلية الطب في جامعة بغداد، ونال الأستاذية في عام 1988. ترأس شعبة الجراحة العصبية وأسس مركز جراحة محجر العين الذي افتتح عام 2002. نشر أكثر من 60 بحث وأشرف على أطاريح في الطب والهندسة والحاسبات والإحصاء. حاز على جوائز عديدة، منها جائزة اتحاد أطباء العرب 1997، ووسام العلم درجة أولى عام 1999. مع الأسف اختطفته عصابة مجرمة وأجرب على مغادرة الوطن بعد أن أطلق المجرمون سراحه لقاء فدية مالية عالية جدا. غادر إلى واشنطن وعين مستشارا ثقافيا هناك عام 2006، وعاد بناء الملحقية الثقافية هناك وعزز التعاون الأكاديمي بين البلدين. أطلق مشروع ما يسمى سوية من أجل العراق، وأسس منظمة توفيق لدعم التعليم العالي والبحث العلمي، وهو الآن يشرفنا بحضور ندوتنا هذه لإغنائها بخزين من المعلومات القيمة التي يمتلكها والخبرة العالية المستوى في مجال الجراحة العصبية. إضافة إلى ذلك الدكتور الخليلي له مؤلفات عديدة، آخرها كتابه الأخير ما بين تلافيف الدماغ، رحلتي في الجراحة العصبية والحياة. فإذا الدكتور عبد الهادي الخليلي إذا يشرفنا بالحضور والمشاركة من خلال الزوم.
دكتور عبد الهادي تسمعنا؟
صوت منكم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
أود أولا أن أتقدم بالتشكر كريمة وأقدم خالص التهنئة مقرونة بالاعتزاز والفخر للدكتور حارث أكرم على هذه المحاضرة العلمية المتميزة والمحفزة للتفكير. ويسعدني على نحو خاص أن أرى أحد زملائنا الشباب الذين نفخر بأنهم الأبناء والوطنيين يقدموا اليوم محاضرة رصيدة تقنيات كانت وحتى وقت قريب تعد غربا من الخيال العلمي. لقد سمعتم الدكتور حارث أين أصبحنا، أما أنا فسأحدثكم بإيجاز كيف وصلنا إلى هنا.
نسمعك دكتور عبد الهادي.
Every revolutionary idea has deep historical roots. Neuralink did not appear overnight. It's the latest chapter in a long scientific journey. To understand where we are going, we must first understand how we got there. The remarkable advances we see today are built on countless discoveries made by previous generations. Every scientific breakthrough becomes the foundation for the next. The future is created by standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. Modern surgery became possible because four revolutions occurred: experience, antisepsis, anesthesia, and antibiotics. Without these foundations, none of today's sophisticated technologies would exist. Technology changes surgery, fundamentals make technologies possible. Behind every medical revolution stood visionaries who the accepted practice at the time. Their discoveries transformed surgery from a dangerous art into scientific discipline. Every generation has its pioneers. And we can see here, Abdul Hadi AL-Khalili was the leader of surgery. Firstly, as Dr. Harith mentioned, was buried in Iraq in 1916, and I have written a long essay on Horsley's life and the details. Horsley and Cushing established neurosurgery as a distinct specialty. Their work laid scientific foundation upon which later generations built. Today's innovations trace directly back to their vision. When I entered neurosurgery in the early 1970s, diagnosis often depended on portable A scan. We used to take it to the outpatient to see the emergency. Very simple wood-made A scan, ultrasound, and common carotid artery or radiography was done through the neck under extensive general anesthesia. I then witnessed the arrival of CT scan, MRI, and neuronavigation, and each revolutionizing our specialty. Looking back, I have learned that today's miracles often become tomorrow's routine. Imaging revolutionized neurosurgery by allowing us to see what had previously been hidden. CT revealed structure, MRI added details, and functional imaging can reveal function. Diagnosis became increasingly surgery became increasingly safer. If I had to choose the three technologies that most transformed my and our own practice, they would be electrocautery and operating microscope and neuronavigation. Each revolution made surgery safer, more precise, and more effective. Together, they prepared the way for today's brain-computer technologies. The distance between these two images spans centuries of innovation, yet both represent the same human goal: restoring neurological function. Neuralink is not the beginning of the story. It's simply the newest. At the turn of the century, or turn of the millennium, the Lancet journal invited experts to predict medicine over the next 100 years. Implantable neural devices and brain-computer communication were among those predictions. 25 years later, many of the ideas are already entering clinical practice. Deep brain stimulation taught us that electrical modulation of the brain can restore lost function. Brain-computer interfaces have extended that concept from stimulation to communication. Neuralink represents an evolution, not revolution in isolation. Long before brain-computer interfaces, researchers were exploring biological ways to restore function after spinal cord injury. Our experimental work in Iraq, published RPG in 1988, followed that same dream through nerve grafts and omental transplantation, first on mice and then on dogs, with significant good results. Today, Neuralink pursues the same goal through a different technology, restoring function, dependence, and hope. Future promises restoration of movement, speech, memory, and perhaps even vision, as Harith was mentioning. Artificial intelligence will increasingly become our partner in diagnosis and treatment. When I entered neurosurgery in the early 1970s, we dreamt of seeing the brain more clearly. Today, we are beginning to communicate directly with it. I can only imagine what the next generation of neurosurgeons will witness over the next 50 years. ولكن يجب أن يظل التكنولوجيا في خدمة الإنسان لا أن تحل محل قيمه. وكل تقدم يجب أن يبقى محكوما بالأخلاق، بالكرامة الإنسانية والرحمة. في نهاية هذه الرحلة أود أن أشارككم ذكرى عزيزة على قلبي. هذه اللوحة أهداها إلي أستاذي ومعلمي الدكتور خالد القصر، وكتب على ظهرها: أشعر كأني أعيش حياة أخرى في تلميذ أفخر به كعبد الهادي الخليلي. أرجو أن تكون معبرة عن إعجابي الدائم. كانت تلك من أعظم الشهادات التي أعتز بها في حياتي. واليوم بعد أكثر من نصف قرن في جراحة الأعصاب أدرك أن أجمل ما يتركه الإنسان ليس ما ينجزه بيديه، بل ما يغرسه في تلاميذه. لعل أجمل ما أتمناه في هذه المرحلة من حياتي أن أرى ثمرة رحلتي في إنجازات الجيل الجديد من جراحي الأعصاب، وفي مقدمتهم الدكتور حارث أكرم، ومعه كثير من زملائه المبدعين في خارج العراق وداخله. كما رأى أستاذي يوما ثمرة رحلتي فيه، هكذا تستمر الرحلة من معلم إلى تلميذ ومن جيل إلى جيل. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا جزيلا للبروفيسور عبد الهادي الخليلي في إغنائه محاضراتنا هذه لهذا اليوم. فقد جرى حديثه على جولة في تاريخ جراحة الجملة العصبية من بدايات الرواد الأوائل وربط تشريح المخ والأعصاب بالوظائف الجملة العصبية، ومن ثم أيضا تكلم عن التطورات التي حصلت في تشخيص الأمراض الجملة العصبية والآلات والأجهزة التي استخدمت في مثل هذا التشخيص، ومنها السي تي سكان والMRI سكان
المعروف بالرنين. وبهذا نحن نشكر شكر جزيل ونفخر بحضور البروفيسور عبد الهادي الخليلي معنا في هذه الندوة، وهو قامة عراقية معروفة كما ذكرت سابقا عبر الأجيال التي مرت ومارست الجراحة الجملة العصبية في العراق وحتى في إنجلترا من العراقيين. فشكرا جزيلا أستاذ عبد الهادي الخليلي. شكرا. أعتقد يمكن كلتنا شوية عطشانين، ف لا دا يسمعوني كل زين. اكو بعض المشروبات موجوده هناك في نهايه القاعه، فتفضلوا لفتره قصيره جدا لانه عندنا فعاليه اخرى بعد هذه، وهي تكريم الاستاذ الدكتور صباح جاسم. فتفضلوا الى نهايه القاعه رجاء، ونرجع وبعدين الاسئله والاجوبه. رجاء راح ناخذ اسئله من عندكم. الاسئله يجب ان لا تكون شخصيه. اذا واحد عنده اي مشكله او مرض شخصي هذا بعدين يقدر يتصل بالدكتور حارث وهو راح ينطيه العنوان وطريقه الاتصال. الاسئله فقط لازم تكون فقط على المحاضره اللي القاها الدكتور حارث، حتى نفسح المجال لزملائنا الاخرين الموجودين بالزوم ايضا. فاذا اي واحد عنده اي سؤال يتعلق بالمحاضره مو سؤال شخصي، رجاء يرفع ايده واحنا راح نكتب اسماء. نعم نعم تفضل. نعم تفضل.
دكتور
تقدر تقوم شويه والصوت عالي.
Yeah, so my name is Hassan. I work in the transport field, so very different to the field that you work in, but it's very fascinating, very interesting. But my question relates to, well, there's two parts to the question actually. So one, is it a technological effort and a project that you're working on, or is it a medical project? Because I think they're quite distinct. And then depending on the answer to that question, sorry? Carry on. Carry on. Yeah, so I guess my question was two parts. One is it a technological project or a medical project? And then linked to that, and you sort of mentioned at the end of your presentation, is about the ethical and moral issues. But my specific question is around ethical governance. So how does decision making happen? Is it a collective decision making effort, or is there a prime person, either from the medical or technological field, who makes the decision? And then the second part of the question is, how does systems integration work? It's a quite complicated effort across lots of disciplines. So how does that come together? Because it's a fascinating sort of area of expertise that I'm interested to learn about. Thank you.
تقدر اذا صوت عالي يصير هدوء بالقاعه تقدر، بس هذا الميكروفون هم يعني. تفضل.
Shukran. Thank you very much for very good questions. So the first question is whether this is a medical or a technological. I don't see a distinction. I think obviously you can be a doctor who, a physician who only, practices medicine without having to be an academic and to do science. I'm an academic neurosurgeon, so really everything I do is to do with technology, and my fellows at the moment, so when I get fellows to train, I don't look at just at their CV to see if they they went to the right school, or I never really care about that. What I care about is can they do Python? Can they code? That's, for me, that's a lot more important than other things. So it's trespassing on other specialties and other fields is what actually drives science forward. If we're all just working in silos and sticking to our own fields, we're not going to go anywhere. Second question about ethics. So the trial had to go through two ethics committees and through a very rigorous process by something called the MHRA and the AHRA, and at the end of the day, I'm responsible for those patients. So I have to make sure that they are well informed, that when they consent, it's an informed consent, and that they're not just they're involved, their carers are involved. So the decision making is multidisciplinary. We have to ask a lot of different specialists as well. So if I'm putting a patient with motor neuron disease under general anesthesia, I need to get the respiratory physician and the anesthetist to see the patient, make sure that I'm not putting that patient in danger because they have problems with respiratory function and whatnot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. نعم تفضل.
Second question about
الأسئلة رجاء نحاول أن هناك تكون معادة وأيضا تكون قصيرة جدا بدون مداخلات.
My question is about monitoring the patient, for example, for that. Would you have used a bit of technology?
Technology at the same time, also NHS on this side, about the maintaining support at the patient, how it's going to work.
Yeah. So
especially if you do some operation, for example, for overseas, how they can maintain the support at the patient. Thank you.
Yeah. You have to have that system in place. You can't. So you're talking about Neuralink in particular, or kind of everything? Because I travel. I operate on patients in. I've operated on 2 patients in Brazil. I've operated on patients in Germany and Switzerland, and I go because they need my help. I can guide them through the surgery for different conditions. And I still have to keep a link, make sure that the patients are doing okay, but I will never do anything like this if I'm not sure that the local team have the expertise. They can keep monitoring the patients, and they can deal with any issues that can arise. So it's not a one-off thing. Patients with deep brain stimulation, once we implant a device in, we monitor them for life. They keep coming back every year just to check that they're okay.
Thank you. نعم تفضل دكتور.
أنا أقدر أصيح. السلام عليكم. أولاً start with thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you for the Academic Association for giving this opportunity to look at cutting edge stuff. I was just thinking that, what you're doing is really robotic surgery, isn't it? In a way, you're operating a sort of a computer and the robot is sort of stitching things in. Do you think that could be scalable to become, as you know, there is now telerobotics. So you have a patient in Beijing and a surgeon in Hong Kong, and the surgeon will talk to the robot, as long as there is someone who can support if there is a problem. Do you think this will ever be in this way, and what is the scale? Because obviously a lot of these neuro injuries are really common in where we come from, especially with the trauma of various things that happened in the area.
Yeah, excellent question. With the Da Vinci system, this already exists. So you can do remote surgery with the Da Vinci system. I think it's really not about the technicalities with this. It's the surgery itself is not that technical. Once you know how to do it and you have the equipment and the robot, it's about the decision making. You must know this very well with your field. It's not about deciding about how to deliver a baby. It's about when you intervene, when you do a C-section, when it's all about the decision making. It's about patient selection, decision making, and the surgeon in this, in the OR is not just the operator, but the group leader. So you go into the operating room, and there will be about 15 people inside, different engineers and robotic technicians and anesthetists, and there's a room next door with another 10 people who are doing other things to make sure that the surgery goes well. So the surgeon's role is to lead that whole team and make sure that the end result is what you want, is what you hope for. So the technique itself, I think you're right. These robots will become potentially even independent. In future, they can do the operations on their own, but it's about the leadership and the decision making that I think is important.
شكرا جزيلا. نعم تفضل.
شكرا دكتور على المحاضرة الجيدة. بس سؤالي هنا ممكن ال AI application can help in your field. Maybe it's already implemented, I don't know. Especially in decision making, AI can look so vector databases being implemented pre-this operation, and I collect that data and help the surgeon to make a quick decision. I don't know. If that's something could be considered in the field. Thank you.
Nice. So, thank you. I'm not a Luddite. I love AI. I use AI in when I do any scientific research, I just say, go and find me the evidence for this, and it will go and generate everything. I don't think it's, I wouldn't trust it to make decisions, for sure. It hallucinates quite a lot as well. But there is nothing, I don't think AI or at least the AI that we have now, doesn't have a gut feeling. That instinct that only humans have. Female humans have it a lot more than male humans, but humans have that gut instinct which comes from experience. It's pattern recognition. I sometimes see a patient and I think, I'm not comfortable about this, even though on paper everything looks fine. It's because I have this gut feeling that there's something wrong. And that comes from experience and pattern recognition, which I don't know if AI can do. So I wouldn't. That said, AI has been really instrumental in diagnosis and helping us to diagnose early diagnosis of stroke, for example. A very good example that you can get a scan. The patient gets a scan, immediately gets red flagged as possible stroke because time is brain. And we need to intervene very quickly. So it's very useful, but it doesn't replace surgeons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. نعم تفضلي.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for that fantastic presentation. My name is Sonia. I actually work in AI security, so this was right up my street.
شوي رفع الميكروفون.
Oh, thank you. I have a few questions, but I'll keep it very short. My first question is, you gave many examples of the different uses of technology in neuroscience, for example, robotics and AI, as you're just speaking right now. In your personal experience, what do you think has had the biggest, which piece of technology has had the biggest positive impact on patient care and outcomes? Is it the robotics, is it the AI? And the second, to do with neurosecurity, do you think there's a future in which these kind of technologies can be nationalized, so kind of the risks that you spoke about, like companies going fast, or the security going to data and encryption can be mitigated? Thank you so much.
Both excellent questions. I'd say AI a lot more than robotics, for sure. I mean, I run a computational neuroimaging lab, and I can see how the application of AI in imaging has been amazing. So we can get quicker scans, much better scans, and identify lesions. So I've also, just look, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry went to DeepMind. Dennis and I did our PhDs in the same lab, so I always apologize to my PhD supervisor. So I think AI. Second question, yes, we need to have, so I've just written an article that in Nature that's going to come out in a couple of weeks, discussing that and proposing ways of having, anyone who's going to do a trial, run a trial, sponsor a trial, they have to commit to maintaining these devices, also having inter-device compatibility, for example. And the last thing is, I work with the Dawes Institute for the Dawes Institute for Future Crime, and we, just to look at issues with security with these devices. I think people focus on the wrong thing. They focus on the data, which, fair enough. I mean, it's private, but it's gibberish. It's meaningless. What's worrying is, these are BCI, these glasses. If you hack into the battery, they can explode. If you hack into any lithium battery, it can explode, right? Your earbuds, if you play the right frequency, can explode. So these are a lot more pressing issues that we need to think about.
اوكي شكرا جزيلا. العفو دكتور سلمى، عندي سؤال؟
يس.
تفضلي.
اثنين قصيرة جدا. شكرا طبعا دكتور حارث على المحاضرة والعمل يعني اللي ما يضاهي انتم. احنا نقول احنا سوينا شيء بس مقارنة لك. السؤال الأول أنه كل هذه الامبلانتس بالدماغ how often تصير infections بالمنطقة؟ وكذلك السؤال الثاني تكلمت عن الديستونيا، المعروف أنه ينطون الكلوستريديوم بوتيولاينم توكسين اللي يستعمل يعني كإنجكشن، هواية ناس يستعملوه كالبوتوكس لمساعدة هذول المرضى. فكيف تقارن ما تسويه أنت مع ما يعطى الآن؟
شكرا.
شكرا دكتورة سلوى، شكرا على الكلمات الحلوة. أبدي بالديستونيا. طبعا هذول يعني ما كان عندي وقت إنه أشوف فيديوهات، بس it's a very refractory cases. So cervical dystonia and systemic dystonias. So DYT1 dystonia, for example, where it's actually lethal if untreated. We always start with Botox if there is if there is an element that we can help with Botox. But if it progresses, then deep brain stimulation would be the next step. Our infection rate is very low. It's about 1%, and I'm not going to go into the details. It's still there because we're covered in millions of bugs, and if one of them makes its way into the implant, it will, it can hide there. Your immune system can't get to it, and then at some stage it can start, when your immunity goes down, it can start to create an infection. But there are a lot of things that I do to reduce that risk, but it is about 1%. Yeah.
اوكي سؤال اخير. تفضل. هذا اخر سؤال بعدين.
دكتورة. My name is Kamran Naif. I'm oral surgeon, and for many years I worked on trigeminal neuralgia. And I wonder if there is any advance in treatment, and if there is any implant you could put in. I remember in the old days there was microvascular decompression. So any news from that?
Thank you. So the question was for those in the back about any advances in the treatment of trigeminal neuralgia. So if you don't know what trigeminal neuralgia is, this is a kind of sharp shooting electric-like pain in the face, which is called suicide pain. So patients who get trigeminal neuralgia, if it's not treated, they commit suicide. It's the worst pain imaginable. Microvascular decompression is still a very good option, so I do that if there is a vessel pressing on the nerve. If there isn't a vessel, I do something called neurolysis or combing. So I go in and I spread the nerve bundles. And I actually do this operation with a robot. So I use a robotic arm that holds an exoscope. And that creates new insulation between the nerve fibers. There's obviously the percutaneous approaches where you do rhizotomies. If this doesn't work, deep brain stimulation in other conditions, so Summit and Suna, we can do deep brain stimulation in the ventral tegmental area. I've done the most in the world. I've got about 100 patients, and I've written the biggest cases. And if that doesn't work,
we can do something called a cingulotomy, which disconnects the agony center in the brain, so that disconnects the affective pain pathway. Sorry, it was looking at me. And if that doesn't work, then I can do a trigeminal nucleus stimulation. So I put electrodes on the spinal cord between the neck and the head, and they sit on the trigeminal nucleus and they stimulate and help with pain. Yeah, there's quite a few.
شكرا جزيلا. احنا دائما نقول اخر سؤال، بس على عادة العراقيين لازم يكون سؤال اخر. وهذا فعلا اخر سؤال وماكو بعد.
دكتور، أكثر المرضى اللي أنت تعالجهم they are diagnosed either with strokes or Parkinson's. There is a group of people who are post-COVID develop this paralysis where all the tests are normal. Do they, can they get benefit out of what you're doing, or?
So I mean, so what COVID taught us is it was an accelerated learning curve into conditions that we used to dismiss in the past, like chronic fatigue syndrome, for example, where we just thought, oh, this is all in the mind and it's not true. Patients are making it up. But actually, we found that it's post-viral encephalopathy or encephalitis that is causing these conditions. And we're still trying to figure it out. I can't claim to be an expert because it's not really a surgical, there's no surgical treatment at the moment. So I don't have an answer, I'm afraid. But I think because of COVID, we have a lot of cases that we are learning from, and that might help in the future. We've just in Queen's Square, we've just we had a trial of gene trial to cure Huntington's disease. 75% improvement in patients with Huntington's disease, and that's incredible. Nobody's ever imagined something like this to happen. And so, don't lose hope. Yeah.
The problem, nobody give them any diagnosis. That's it, and they are, doing
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا لجميع والآن ننتقل إلى الفقرة التالية، وهي تكريم الأستاذ الدكتور صباح جاسم، صديقنا وزميلنا وعزيزنا في الرابطة، وراح نتكلم عن تاريخه الأكاديمي. ودكتورة سلوى راح تلقينا كلمة أو بعض الكلمات عن هذا الشيء. تفضل.
شكرا. طبعا باسمي ونيابة عن أعضاء الهيئة الإدارية يسعدنا ويشرفنا أن يكون بيننا البروفيسور صباح عبد جاسم، وهو أستاذ في علوم الرياضيات وعلم الحاسبات في School of Computing بجامعة باكنغهام في لندن. تخرج من جامعة بغداد بكالوريوس وماجستير في الرياضيات ودكتوراه في الرياضيات من جامعة سوانزي عام 1981. بعد ذلك شغل مناصب أكاديمية مختلفة في عدد من الجامعات، ومنها جامعة ألمانيا، جامعة سوانزي دي مونتفورد، جامعة سيتي لندن، وكذلك جامعات في البصرة والسليمانية. تشمل اهتماماته البحثية الإجراءات الجماعية على أسطح اليمن والخرائط الجبرية وهياكل البيانات والهندسة الحسابية والطوبولوجيا وتحليل الصور الطوبولوجي لاكتشاف العبث وتصنيف الورم والتعرف على القياسات الحيوية الوجه والمشي وخصوصية وأمان الوسائط المتعددة والقوالب البيومترية والتعلم الآلي لتشخيص الأورام. نشر بروفيسور صباح أكثر من 150 ورقة بحثية في مجلات ومؤتمرات معروفة، وأشرف بنجاح على 28 رسالة دكتوراه، 35 رسالة دكتوراه في الرياضيات، وعلم الحاسبات الكمبيوتي، وشارك في مشاريع مع معاهد في دول الاتحاد الأوروبي. بروفيسور صباح هو أحد مؤسسي شبكة العلماء العراقيين في الخارج نيسا، وهو أيضا عضو الهيئة الاستشارية لرابطة الأكاديميين العراقيين في المملكة المتحدة. شارك الدكتور صباح مشاركة فعلية بالمؤتمر الأخير الذي أقامته رابطة الأكاديميين عن التلوث البيئي وحلولها في شهر أيلول من العام المنصرم في لندن. وأخيرا وهنا في المملكة المتحدة للتقديم إلى مرحلة البروفيسور أو الأستاذ في الجامعة نحتاج إلى 4 بروفيسورية لإعطاء رأيهم بالأستاذ أو بالشخص الأكاديمي الذي يقدم إلى مرحلة البروفيسورية. ودكتور صباح طبعا من سألته كان له الشرف ورحب بشكل كبير، وهو أحد البروفيسورز ال4 اللي انطوني المنحة أو اللي انطوني البرميشن أنه حتى أقدم إلى المرحلة اللي صرت بها، فأشكره من أعماق قلبي. طبعا قبل ما ننطي التروفي إلى دكتور صباح من رابطة الأكاديميين، الأستاذ والبروفيسور دكتور محمد الرباعي يحب أن يلقي كلمة قصيرة بهذه المناسبة. تفضل دكتور محمد.
وجامعة دي مونفورت وجامعة فاشوشولا-فيدل في ألمانيا، وصولا إلى استقراره في جامعة بكنهام منذ عام 1989، حيث شغل منصب أستاذ الرياضيات ورئيس قسم الحوسبة التطبيقية. لم تكن بصمة صباح في سجلات العلم مجرد أرقام في قواعد البيانات، بل كانت إرثا فكريا راسخا، فإنتاجه الموسوعي الذي يزخر بمئات الأوراق البحثية لم يحصد فقط معدلات اقتباس استثنائية أو مؤشر H-index متقدما، بل أرسى معايير معرفية أصبحت مرجعا لا غنى عنه في المكتبة العلمية العالمية، وهذا هو التتويج الحقيقي لمسيرته. ترك بصمة واضحة كصوتا مؤثرا في مشاريع بحثية أوروبية كبرى مثل سكيور فون وبرود وان، وأصبح رئيسا لمؤتمرات دولية مرموقة مثل SPIE للدفاع والأمن، فضلا عن كونه محكما دائم المراجعة للأبحاث العلمية في المجلات التخصصية. ولم تقتصر مساهمته المعرفية على الأطر البحثية التقنية فحسب، بل امتدت لتكون جسرا أكاديميا عابرا للحدود، حيث وضع بصمته الريادية في صرح علمي متميز هو كلية سارييغو للعلوم والتكنولوجيا في البوسنة والهرسك. فقد كان شريكا مؤسسا وموجها أكاديميا، ساهم في صياغة برامجها وتطوير مناهجها، بما في ذلك برنامج الدكتوراه لاتضاح المعايير العالمية، وذلك على مدى 10 سنوات. وهو الدور الذي جسد إيمانه العميق بأن العلم أمانة تتجاوز الحدود الجغرافية ليعيد صياغة المشهد التعليمي هناك برؤية جمعت بين رصانة جامعة بكنهام وعراقة الإرث الأكاديمي اللي يحملها. لم تكن اهتماماته سطحية، بل امتد لتشمل أبحاثا متقدمة في عدة مجالات: أنظمة القياسات الحيوية، الأمن الرقمي، رؤية الحاسوب، والعلوم الحيوية الحاسوبية. ولكن خلف هذا البريق الأكاديمي كان هناك إنسان حمل العراق في قلبه أينما ارتحل. كان صباح شابا مناضلا في صفوف جمعية الطلبة العراقيين، قاوم الظلم صلابة موقفه، وبعد عام 2003 لم يتردد لحظة في تلبية نداء الوطن، قدم جهودا استثنائية ضمن برنامج اليونسكو الاستراتيجي لإعادة تأهيل نظام التعليم العالي العراقي. وقد كان هذا المشروع تجسيدا لطموحه الوطني كعالم وخبير عراقي مغترب، حيث عمل تحت راية شبكة ميسا على إرساء أسس علمية رصينة لضمان الجودة، مستهدفا استدخال مفاهيم الاعتماد البرامجي والمؤسساتي للجامعات العراقية في مسعى تؤوب لنقلها من أطرها المحلية إلى رحاب المعايير الدولية، واضعا خبرته التراكمية في خدمة الجامعات الوطنية لا سيما في إقليم كردستان. الدكتور صباح هو راغب العلم كما أحب أن تسميته، الذي رفض أن يستسلم للتقاعد بعد أن أثبت داخله الأمانة العلمية وطول المسيرة، ليؤكد لنا أن العقار لا يعرف عمرا ولا يرتبط بالوظيفة، بل هو عهد أبدي مع المعرفة. أما نحن أصدقائه ورفاق دربه، وهو حسن وموفق وأحمد وإحسان حسن موجود معنا في لقائنا الأسبوعية، فنحن نعرف وجها آخر لصباح، ذلك الطيف المحبب الذي يأتيك متأخرا بعض الشيء، والذي قد تغالبه صفوة هادئة وسط الحديث، لكن يظل يقظا بقلبه وعقله لكل كلمة. صباح يكره السخط وينفر من المشاحنات الحادة، فإذا احتد النقاش ينسحب بهدوء إلى مقعد المراقبة الصامت، ومنتظرا فرصة ليطل علينا بظرافته ونوادره وحكايات الماضي التي تعيد لنا روح الشباب. إنه رجل السلام النفسي الذي فضل خفة الروح على ثقل الجدال. ختاما، اليوم ونحن نكرم الدكتور صباح جاسم من خلال رابطة الأكاديميين العراقيين في المملكة المتحدة، لا نكرم فيه العالم الذي أبدع عالميا فحسب، إن نكرم الزميل اللي بقى وفيا لجذوره، والرفيق الذي تعلمنا منه إن الصلابة العلمية لا تتعارض أبدا مع رقة الإنسانية. دكتور صباح، شكرا لعطائك الذي لا ينضب، وشكرا لأنك كنت دائما مثالا للعراقي الذي يرفع اسم بلاده عاليا دون أن ينسى يوما كيف يبتسم للحياة وللأصدقاء. دمت بخير ودام عطائك وتألقك. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا جزيلا. والآن دكتور صباح، تفضل. دكتور صباح، جرت العادة أيضا لتكريم أعضاء الرابطة البارزين والذين قاموا بأعمال ثمينة جدا للرابطة، واليوم سعيد جدا أن نيابة عن رابطة الأكاديميين أن أقدم لك هذا التروفي الذي يرمز إلى عطائك الفذ مثلما شهدوا بذلك دكتورة سلوى ودكتور محمد الربيعي. فشكرا جزيلا دكتور صباح.
قبل ما ننهي دكتور صباح وقبل كلمتك، يمكن شخص آخر عزيز عليك وأنت عزيز عليه أيضا، أريد أحكي دقيقتين بس.
معرفتي مع الدكتور صباح يرجع إلى سبتمبر 1973. دخلنا الجامعة السليمانية وكلية هندسة. كان دكتور صباح هذا الشاب الأشقر دخل الجامعة وكان صوت قسم من العرب قالوا هذا جاني أستاذ إنجليزي. قلت لا، هذا انتم حلوين، هذا أستاذ كردي. كان يدرسنا الرياضيات، والعجيب الغريب في أول امتحان للفصل الأول دخلت 95. هاي ما أعرف محمد الربيعي كان غلط على كل. والنتيجة بقى الجامعة مفتوحة إلى آذار 74 ومن صارت إعادة الاختتال في كردستان مع الأسف. سدت الجامعة وورق الافتتاح الدكتور صباح كان موجود.
هو بس حكى شو خرب الصوت.
شو؟
ما تستغربوا عليه.
بس سوي سايلنت رجال.
دكتور صلاح اكو جانب اخر من
لا عبد ذلك خابره
كلكم مدى نسمع.
اكو جانب من شخصيه الدكتور صلاح اللي هو قليل منكم يعرف. انسان وطني بمعنى الكلمه، انسان ديمقراطي بمعنى الكلمه. بالثمانينات من التقينا من جديد هنا كان يلعب دور متميز في قضيه التضامن مع الشعب الكردي ومع الشعب العراقي. ليس فقط داخل جمعيه الطلبه العراقيين، داخل جمعيه الطلبه الاكراد، الكاردري وتضامن مع ضحايا حلبشة بعدين انفال وهاي. وبالتسعينات كان من الاوائل ساهم بتشكيل هيئه لدعم جامعات الكردستان، جامعه السليمانيه بعد ان تم افتتاحه من جديد في 91 92. ومع مجموعه من الاطباء والاكاديميين الاكراد دكتور صباح كان من اوائل السهم الموجود. واستمر في هذا مساهمات العلميه للجامعات السليمانيه وصلاح الدين، استمر حتى بعد 2003 حيث كان هو استاذ المساهم في جامعه كردستان. ولفتره قصيره كان صار رئيس جامعه كردستان، ولكن لاسباب سياسيه لم يخلوا يبقى بهذا الجانب. دكتور صباح شخصيه متميزه في وطنيته وفي تقدمته، واني براود ان اعرفه وصديقي منذ 73. ودائما اشوفه اقول لك شلون الاستاذ؟ يقول لي الله يخليك مو كافي. بس اخر شيء صدقوني ورا 53 بس شويه شعرات البيضاء طالع والا نفس الشيء.
شكرا للرابطة والحضور أيضا الزملاء الحاضرين على هذا التكريم اللي يعتز به اعتزاز كبير، واللي أيضا يذكرني بكثير من ما ولو الجماعة ما قصروا فضحوا كل الأمور حتى الأمور البسيطة. يعني شكرا جزيلا على هذا التقدير، وأود أن أستغل هذه الفرصة بأن نتذكر الزملاء اللي غادرونا قبل وقته. مؤخرا الدكتور سعدي النجار فقدناه قبل أيام.
صوت مو مسموع، أنا رجال صوت مو مسموع.
بعدين أقول لك. طبعا المحاضرة الأولى اللي قدمها الدكتور حارث يعني انسبريشنال بشكل كبير، لكن هو شاب الآن وقدم لنا مثال على أن الشبيبة بإمكانها العراقية أن تقدم كل شيء مو فقط للعراق وإنما للمجتمع الدولي، كل ما يعمله لخير الإنسان أيضا. وهذا شكرا على أن تقدم هذه المحاضرة. يعني وشكرا على الرابطة دكتورة سلوى، يعني أتشرف بأن كنت أحد الرفريس بالنسبة لك، ولو احنا في مواضيع مختلفة تماما. ويشرفني أيضا أن أشوف أيضا مو بس طلابي موجودين في القاعة، وإنما أحد زميلاتي قديما في أثناء الدراسة الجامعية وما بعد الجامعية أيضا موجود، وكافة الزملاء الآخرين. أعتذر عن الأسماء الآخرين اللي ما أعرفهم، بس أيضا ذكرني الدكتور محمد نشاطاتنا في قضية اليونسكو كانت يعني هذه ترجع إلى بداية تأسيس رابطة الأكاديميين. يعني لما تأسست رابطة الأكاديميين في العراق في نهاية الثمانينات أو بداية التسعين، كان طبعا مجموعة كبيرة من عندنا، واحنا كنا طلاب خلصنا الدكتوراه أو الماجستير قسم وما قدرنا نرجع، أسباب عديدة كلكم تعرفوها. يعني هذه الظروف اللي مرت بالعراق ولا زالت تمر بها، ما قدر أي واحد من عندنا أن يرجع. فرجعنا نشتغل نستمر بحملات التضامن اللي ذكرها العزيز كاوة، لكن أصبح وجودنا كنا في ذاك الوقت احنا بالجامعات اساتذه نشتغل يعني بالجامعه، بس نشتغل من خلال في حملات التضامن من خلال جمعيه طلبه العرب، فاصبحت اكو ضروره انه تتكون رابطه الاكاديميين. كانت في ذاك الوقت هدفين عندها اساسيه، التضامن، بعدين دائما التفكير كيف نساهم لاعاده الوضع في العراق او تحسين التعليم العالي، وهذا كان هذا هدف من برامج اليونسكو وبرامج اللي صارت مع جامعات كردستان اللي ذكرها، وظلينا نروح ونجي، بس مع الاسف يعني ما استمرت لانه الامور اكبر من عندنا. بس مع هذه الجمهره انشر الرابطه ممكن بعد تسهم اكثر، وان شاء الله تنفتح فرص افضل في هاي المسألة. وشكرا جزيلا لهذا التقدير، وأنا
والآن نحب أن نقدم شكر إلى عزيزنا الدكتور حارث أكرم بتقديم سيرتيفيكت اللي هو شيء بسيط لا يضاهي أبدا المنجزات اللي قام بها وطنيا دوليا وإلى آخره، ولكن فكرنا أنه هذا أقل ما يمكن أن نقدمه للدكتور حارث. فتفضل دكتور حارث وشكرا جزيلا. وأنا متأكد أنه الدكتور حارث قد استلم سيرتيفيكتس من جميع أنحاء العالم، من جميع منظمات الأكاديمية الدولية، مو بس من رابطة الأكاديميين. إضافة إلى ذلك عندنا أيضا الأستاذ فلاح فيلي رئيس المنتدى العراقي، يحب أن أيضا يشكر الدكتور حارث بتقديم باقة ورد جميلة جدا. وتفضل.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور حارث، أنت فخر للجالية العراقية ونفتخر بك وبأعمالك متميزة من أجل العلم والإنسانية وإلى الأمام. شكرا.
والله خجلتوني يعني
تستاهل واكثر.
يعني أنا صراحة أنا مو كل زين بالحكي يعني دكتور صباح كلش ألكوت. والمشكلة طلعت من العراق من كان عمري 21 سنة، مو نسيت بس يعني ما تقدمت باللغة العراقية. بس بالإنجليزي زين، بالإنجليزي زين.
ما يخالف، من تنتمي إلى رابطتنا راح
تتعلم. بس بصراحة يعني من دكتورة سلوى ودكتور أحمد ودكتور يعقوب لينارس اتصلوا بي حتى دعوني على أنطي هذه المحاضرة. كلش يعني أنا didn't hesitate، بس ما ترددت لأنه شرف كلش كبير. وأنا فقدت والدي قبل سنة، شكرا. فأني يعني فشي كلش غريب، لأنه أنا ما عندي أي اتصال بالجالية العراقية. يعني مرتي إنجليزية ويعني أهلي بأمريكا، يعني هم بأمريكا.
من فقدت والدي فشي صار بي، بس ردت اسمع الاغاني القديمه اشوف وجوه عراقيه. فاني قلت اكيد كلش راح يعجبه انه هو يجي وينطي محاضره. صراحه لهذا السبب انا قلت اي طبعا اريد اجي اتعرف عليه، لانه هو لو هو موجود كان كلش كيف. شكرا جزيلا، وان شاء الله يعني نتشاوف مره ثانيه، يعني تعزموني مره ثانيه. هاي راح اجي طبعا بعد، خلاص لازم ادفع. لازم خلاص.
احنا اهلك، فاهلا وسهلا بك. ايوه. بالمناسبه ما دام ذكرت مساله الاشتراك، انا الحقيقه هذه النداء الثالث اللي تنصدره احنا من الهيئه الاداريه لرابطتنا الى الزملاء اعضاء الرابطه، وايضا الزملاء الاخرين اللي يكتبون في موقع الواتساب اللي هم ما دافعين اشتراكات الرابطه، بس احنا سامحينهم ان يكتبون في هذا الموقع. فرجاء مو فقط تدفعون الاشتراك قبل ما تطلعون، وانما وهذا شيء جدي، انما احنا نريد ايضا انه تتبرعون بقدر الامكان، كل واحد حسب امكانيته، من اجل ان تساعدنا لتمشيه امور الرابطه في عقد الندوات والمؤتمرات، لانه مثل ما تعرفون هذه الفعاليات كلها تكلف، واحنا اشتراكاتنا بسيطه جدا اللي هي 20 باوند بالسنه كلها للشخص، فهذا ما يوفي، ولذلك احنا نعتمد على تبرعاتكم السخيه، وهذا السبب اللي قلت لا تطلعون بدونها يعني تنطون شيء. إضافة إلى ذلك الرجاء أيضا، إذا أي واحد من عندكم يحب أن ينشر شيء في موقع الرابطة أو في مجلتنا مجلة صوت الأكاديمي، أن يكون حذر جدا بأن لا ينشر أي صورة تعد إلى المنظمات الإعلامية الدولية مثل رويتر وغيرها، لأنه يكتبون لنا ويعاقبونا ويطلبون غرامة. كوبي رايت. وهاي كوبي رايت ما ممكن أنه واحد ينقذ صور من هالمنظمات الإعلامية وينشرها في مواقعنا احنا. وصارت حادثتين، الحادثة الأولى قبل كم شهر غرمونا 620 باوند لنشر صورة تخص تخرج طلاب الجامعة، وغرمونا أيضا مرة أخرى قبل حوالي أسبوعين أيضا 610 باوندات لنشر صورة تتعلق بمسائل المعمار كانت منشورة في مجلة صوت الأكاديمي. وإحنا بطبيعة الحال المالية مال الرابطة هي جدا قليلة، فاضطرينا أنه إحنا نعوض هذه الخسارة، يعني عيب أقولها من عندنا، ولكن مو هذا بيت القصيد. بيت القصيد أنه رجاء لا تنشروا أي صورة اللي تخص المنظمات الإعلامية العالمية بدون
يدفعوا على الشخص اللي استخدمها.
على كل هاي بحث آخر، احنا ما هذا بس هذا هو رجائي، ورجاء الآخر اللي ذكرته سابقا، رجاء كرموا علينا بالاشتراك، دفع الاشتراك والتبرعات رجاء. وبهذا القدر اليوم نعم اكو ميز هناك موجود واكو قائمه فشكرا جزيلا مره ثانيه على حضوركم، شكرا جزيلا على تعنيكم السفر هذا الحر هذا، وشكرا للدكتور حارث، وايضا شكرا
السلام